Constructive is how Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin described the latest round of trade talks with China. They wrapped up today. Mnuchin, along with Trade Rep Robert Lighthizer and the rest of the U.S. delegations, heading home now. China Vice Premier Liu He will visit Washington next week. Jessica Smith here to break all that down for us. So, Jess, what kind of concrete progress are they making? Do we have any detail?
No real details yet. That is the big question of how much progress negotiators are actually making. Bloomberg is reporting that the two sides are going line by line through the text of an agreement that they can present to President Trump and President Xi. The White House has called the talks constructive and candid. Reuters said yesterday that China had made unprecedented proposals on several issues, including forced technology transfer. And we do know China has agreed to buy more U.S. goods, but many lawmakers want to be sure that the president does not accept a deal that just deals with the trade deficit. They want to deal with those structural issues. That being said, Congress is eager to get this trade dispute with China solved and put it behind us. I talked to Republican Senator Josh Hawley from Missouri about this yesterday. Here's what he had to say.
China's commitment in principle to buy a lot more soybeans is a big deal for Missouri farmers, so that's a very encouraging sign. I hope the administration will hold the Chinese government's feet to the fire on that and get a trade deal that opens up their markets on fair terms.
So if negotiators are able to come to an agreement on some of those tricky issues like IP theft and forced technology transfers, they also have to figure out how to enforce the deal. And Robert Lighthizer did present a framework of an enforcement mechanism to Congress, but we also want to see if the U.S. is going to keep tariffs on China as leverage to enforce a deal. President Trump has floated that idea. So that's going to be a big question that we look to find answers to when negotiators come to D.C. next week. China's delegation is set to be in Washington next week, and talks will continue starting on Wednesday.
Jessica, thank you very much. We want to talk more about trade, and we're going to do that with John Bozzella, who is the global Automakers CEO. This issue of intellectual property and the forced transfer, it's not sexy, and it's perhaps a rough example of that, but years ago, General Motors in China, a competing car maker in China, was building a car that was an exact replica of General Motors. Is this the kind of General Motors Cavalier? Is this the kind of thing we're talking about to stop that kind of absolute theft?
Yeah, it's kind of one example. I think the industry is much more complex and sophisticated today in China than it was back in those days. But yes, it's essential that we make sure that companies that are investing in China from outside of China can control their own destinies. That's critical. And it's good for the Chinese market, and it's good for investors.
Are your members optimistic at this point that we're going to see an outcome that's going to be favorable to them?
I think it's good that both parties continue to talk. I don't have the insight into how close we are to an agreement that obviously the trade negotiators have, but I think it's good. I thought it was very, very good that Director Larry Kudlow said there's no time limit on these negotiations yesterday. So I think that's positive. We have to deal with these issues, but we also have to get beyond this tit-for-tat tariff problem. So what you have here is while you're negotiating, you have collateral damage, which is problems with the tariffs that are hurting automotive manufacturing in the United States, and also the retaliation, which is hurting automotive exports.
Do you imagine any U.S. automakers having to close more facilities given everything that's happening in China? I know GM is closing facilities. Ford is rumored to be getting ready to drop the hammer on some too.
Yeah, we'll have to see how it develops, and I think that's part of what these conversations are about. These negotiations are about. It's really important. These are the two largest auto markets in the world. And that's not going to change anytime soon, China being the largest and the U.S. being the second largest. So I think all these companies are global companies, and they all want to have an opportunity to compete effectively in both markets.
But you're also not only watching the China negotiations, we have yet to ratify in the United States the new NAFTA. And I would imagine that the auto manufacturers are concerned about this getting through Congress. And there's also the European Union and what's going to happen in the negotiations with the EU. What are you hearing from the membership?
Yeah, and the U.S.-Japan negotiations. So there are a whole set of complex negotiations taking place. Let's talk about USMCA first. It's unclear to me right now how it gets ratified. I'm not here to suggest that it won't, but I think that the process is early in the House of Representatives and in the U.S. Senate. I think also USMCA ratification is complicated by the existence of these tariffs, especially the 232 metals tariffs on
the steel and aluminum.
Yeah, they're raising the cost of building a car and truck in the United States by billions of dollars. That has to be resolved, and this 232 automotive investigation probably has to be resolved before the path to ratification is clearer. But USMCA is important.
All right. John Bozzella, Global Automakers CEO, we appreciate your being here on The Move.
Thank you, Adam.